Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday to you. Josh's severe weather, and I hope you all are excited for Thanksgiving and hopefully getting some quality time with your family and friends this week. Now, the weather still going to be a challenge for those of us traveling coast to coast here. We've got another storm system that's going to be heading across the country. One already moving through the eastern U.S. That one not a really big deal. The one that follows it, though, is going to make travel a little bit tougher, especially for those of us in portions of the Northeast that will be dealing with some heavy snow. But what will follow will be a pretty cold start to the month of December. Multiple shots of very cold air coming down. Not quite what we saw a couple of winters ago in December of 2022, but this will definitely eat up that heating bill for many of you here in the central and eastern U.S. And I'm going to talk a lot about that and more here in this video. So let me share my screen with you all, walk you through everything here. And the brutal cold is definitely coming. This map indicates below average temperatures, much below average, arriving at the very end of this month and beginning of December, just to get us all into the holiday season spirit. But that cold is going to be coming in multiple waves over several weeks here from Western Canada. And after as warm as it's been here this fall, this is going to lead to some significant changes and significant lake effect snow as well. I do want to address the tropics real quick because there have been folks out there talking about another tropical storm. It's not going to happen. We are going to have heavy rain across portions of the Western Caribbean and around Haiti and Jamaica. You can see just a very broad area of disturbed weather as a front hangs out here. But the problem we're in now is that it is late in the season and the wind shear is coming up. And if something does try to spin up, it's going to be very close to land here near Costa Rica, Panama, and Nicaragua. So at this point, I think it's just way unnecessary to talk about another named storm. We're pretty much done at this point, and you can see that on the National Hurricane Center map. So did want to address that because one model, the GFS, is notorious for trying to spin things up here, and it does it at the beginning of the year, it does it at the end of the season, it does it during the middle of the season, and during the middle of the season, it didn't do poorly, but at the beginning and end, it's got this bias where every little cloud swirl becomes a hurricane, and that just doesn't look like it's going to happen. So if you run into that online, just use caution would be my advice. Rainfall in the Caribbean, pretty wet here. We're going to see several inches over eastern Cuba, over the southeast Bahamas, over Jamaica, and near Central America, and maybe some flooding as well as we get into the weekend and beyond that in parts of Nicaragua and Honduras, which is obviously very bad for them. Lots of rain coming for Jamaica, the southeast Bahamas as well. The reason I'm talking about that, many of you are probably planning some holiday trips into the Caribbean, and I think you need to be aware that it's going to be pretty wet over the next couple of weeks. Now, let's take a look at the United States and adjacent Canada. And what we see right now is a boundary that is moving across the upper Midwest, and that cold air is moving down into the plains. It was in the 80s in Texas yesterday. It will be cooling off significantly over the next couple of days. But a bigger system swirling to the west of the Pacific Northwest. And this one's going to cross the country fairly quickly, but pick up moisture out of the tropics as it does so. So we're in for some pretty wet weather here as we get into Thanksgiving across the southeast. And at this point, I don't think our prospects for severe weather are significant, but something we're going to have to keep an eye on will be heavy rain and maybe a little bit of severe weather as well. The hazards map, this is from Pivotal Weather, shows just winter weather advisories and warnings mainly across the Superior region, across northern New England, and across the Rocky Mountains. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but if you are planning to travel through these regions, do be prepared for some disruptive winter weather. Here's a look at the NAM model, and I don't know if it's fully in. Yep, here we go. And this is today's weather, so we are going to see some light rain showers crossing the Great Lakes through this afternoon and this evening across the Ohio Valley, moving into PA and into western New York. Now, there will be snow falling here over the UP of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, and across the Superior area of the Arrowhead of Minnesota. Heavier snow, though, on the Canadian side of Lake Superior tonight. We'll see several centimeters of that falling, and there could be a little bit of ice as well to the north of Toronto over the Ottawa area here as we get into the early morning hours of tomorrow. This primarily, though, is not going to be a huge deal. It's going to be a storm that lasts less than 24 hours and then moves out and follows with chillier weather here as we get to Wednesday, which is typically our busiest day of travel leading up to the holiday season. Here's a look at the Northeast, and again, let me reload this for you all to see. Quiet this afternoon, but tonight we start to see some rain spreading in from the west. and some of that rain could freeze on contact in the higher elevations of upstate New York and western Vermont tomorrow morning. It'll be moderate rain, excuse me, and needed rain around New Jersey, eastern PA, the Delaware Valley, but not a very heavy rainfall at this point. This is going to move east tomorrow across portions of Maine and New Hampshire with colder air in place. There will be some mixing with frozen precipitation to be concerned with. The St. Lawrence should stay mainly liquid at this point tomorrow afternoon, and then that moves into Nova Scotia and New Brunswick in the evening, and we will see some snow falling across northern New Brunswick and the Gaspé Peninsula. Behind that, we'll have some a wraparound moisture with some snow and colder air for Wednesday, but not a big deal at this point, at least through Wednesday morning. Farther to the south, you can take a look at what's coming. Again, not a big storm, but we will have some potential for some thunder along this skinny line here, basically from about Natchez, Louisiana, up to about Crossville, Tennessee. Not a very big line of weather, but certainly warmer air today across the southeast out ahead of this front. And then behind the front, it does cool down a little bit here tomorrow and into Wednesday as well, but not a big rainmaker at this point. The next one coming in will be more substantial. And we're going to take a look at that rain potential here. And you can see, generally speaking, not a whole lot from this system, half an inch or less across the southeast. We're going to escape this rain across the majority of Florida here. We'll get a chance to dry out here. But the next one that moves in for Thanksgiving is going to be a much wetter system across the Tennessee Valley, across the Ohio River Valley, and in particular in the Mid-Atlantic region. And we could see substantial amounts of rain in the Carolinas and in Virginia as we get to Thanksgiving afternoon and night, and into the first part of Friday as well. That will mainly avoid the Gulf Coast region. North of I-10, better chance for rain. South of I-10, not a big deal at this point. But if you look at the Northeast, you'll see here moderate amounts of rain from this system. Then the next one comes in, and that one's going to drench coastal New England and the Northeast with some heavier rain. And when we get farther north and west, we will see that change over to wet snow. And I'll talk about those totals here in just a little bit. After that moves out, we're largely in for some dry and cold weather, but the lakes will start to see lake effect snow coming off the lakes here in time for the weekend, and it will be a lot colder. And we're going to take a look at that cold as it marches eastward here. Let me show you the European from earlier. And you'll notice here our ridge of high pressure that has dominated the country is going away, and much colder weather coming down straight from Western Canada this week. It'll be unsettled Thursday, but take a look at this discharge of cold coming. And the one thing to me as a meteorologist that sticks out the most is the amount of ridging of high pressure up in here. What that allows is the cold air that's up at the poles to come south and east in waves. And this is a look at Sunday night and Monday morning, and it is going to be quite chillier across much of the east. And with this trough in place, we are going to see significant snowfall in the Great Lakes and parts of the Northeast. And it's not just the beginning of next week that we have to be concerned with, but another wave here. This is a piece of the polar vortex that snaps off and drops south here for the following weekend. So a lot of you may have holiday plans and parties and parades and things like that. Well, it's going to be brutally cold compared to what we're used to here by the time we get to the 7th and 8th of the month of December. And this is going to cause major issues with lake effect as well. Take a look at this ridge across the western United States. As cold as it is now in Western Canada, we're going to see a complete flip as we get to the first 10 days of the month of December. So a lot of back and forth is coming. Here's a look at the GFS model here from lunchtime to show you this first system tracking eastward here. It'll be windy around the Hudson Bay area. Then we quiet down some. Here comes our next system. And the GFS has kind of struggled with how this is going to play out. A few days ago, it had more snow. Then it killed the storm system and suppressed it south. Now it's kind of coming back north again. So you'll see it's not going to be a big snowfall here across the center of the country. But as this system moves up the coast of New Jersey, up the Jersey Shore, Long Island, there will be enough cold in place for this to produce some snow over parts of Pennsylvania and interior New England. The GFS is not as bountiful on the snow as some of the other models are. I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what I think might happen and might be more likely to happen. This GFS is not super consistent, but you will see it does bring significant cooler weather coming down on Thanksgiving Day. You can see a pretty strong front that is basically latched on right in here. So much cooler across Texas and the southern plains. It'll be cloudy. It'll be kind of ugly. Pretty wet and mild here across the southeast, and where our front tracks, we're going to see substantial amounts of rain here in the Carolinas into the Mid-Atlantic region, and that is going to move up the East Coast here Thursday night into Friday. So Not cold turkey, but wet turkey for certain here. I don't think our chances for severe weather, though, are that high out of this system. And if you're on the Gulf Coast, you know around this time of the year, we actually head into a tornado season. I don't think this system's going to get us there. I think we could have some heavy rain. We may have a few stronger storms, but the wind field is not very impressive. What is more impressive is what follows this system for Black Friday. And you can see a big high pressure system in Saskatchewan. That cold air is going to get driven south and eastward here. And as a result, we're going to see a lot of lake effect and a lot of cloudy, ugly weather here as people go out and shiver Friday morning in the Great Lakes region. As crazy as it was warm here, it's going to be cold in the coming days. Now, we do have to watch disturbances coming around the base of this trough. Right now, we don't see anything too substantial, but the GFS hints next weekend as people are flying back on Sunday, there could be snow in Tennessee and in the mountains here, and maybe something survives and even gets closer to Greensboro or Richmond, Virginia. But we're not looking at anything substantial at this point. The places to avoid are going to be around Buffalo, New York, and north of Syracuse and around Muskegon, Michigan. We're going to see substantial snow as this cold really cranks up here. And I would not be shocked if somebody in the snow belts here got several feet of snow next weekend. So that is something we need to be watching. The cold continues to come down in waves here. Again, the models are not going to handle every system very well this far out in time, but you can see largely it's cool and dry across the southeast. It is frigid across the Great Lakes and northeast, and those around the lakes are going to see a lot of snow as well. Here's the European model. Let me take you back to the 0Z run so we can get some longer range going for you. West Coast quieting down after this California storm moves out here on Wednesday. Next system, this one has snow farther north across central and northern Indiana, maybe around Chicagoland, lower Michigan, and then in particular some heavier, mainly elevational dependent snow like we just saw over portions of northern Pennsylvania, New York, and western and northern New England. So the European has come farther north on this storm, meaning that the rain snow line has shifted farther north. So I think we avoid any substantial snow in the big cities and anywhere south of 84 at this point. But this could be a more significant storm for parts of New England on Thanksgiving Day that we need to be mindful of. Because of that northern track, it's also not as wet across the southeast. It looks more like a spring-type system with bands of showers and gusty winds and maybe a few thunderstorms with it. Take a look at this snow for Thursday night. Northern New England, southern Canada getting crushed. And then that moves out here into the Maritimes on Friday, and the cold air follows as expected here. And the weekend here following Thanksgiving going to be pretty cold for some of those big football games that we're tracking in the plains and in the Northeast as well. Next week, while this is a ways off, we see the cold continues to come down in waves, more snow piles up around the Great Lakes, but there really isn't a southern link to this. So we don't have what we call a positive PNA, which allows for a more active storm track in the southeast. We're not there at this point. So it's either going to be wet and mild or it's going to be cold and dry, and we're certainly used to that here in the southeast. Certainly don't get your hopes up for snow potential at this point. You can see the Europeans starting to get a little nuts here the whole first, or I guess second weekend of December. But at this point, it's still a guessing game. So that is the Euro. Here's the Canadian model. And you can see here, pretty decent amount of rain on Thanksgiving Day. This is the Canadian's faster, so it has the rain in the morning in places like Atlanta and Charlotte and Raleigh, whereas the GFS is more towards the afternoon and evening. And that could still change. But because it's more progressive with this storm, it doesn't have a lot of snow falling. So from my video from last week, before I had to travel to Texas, things are not looking as bad as far as travel goes, but we still are going to have some travel interruptions. Next weekend, again, very cold, lots of lake effect. There is a disturbance we need to track in the Ohio Valley. We could see some sneaky snow on Saturday afternoon, Saturday night across the Ohio Valley and then into the Appalachians, and largely dry for Sunday. And the Canadian is moisture here, so it could have some more troubling weather as we come into the beginning of the following week. The rest of the video, I'm going to chat about temperatures for you all and then snow totals. Take a look at the cold in Western Canada. It's bottled up there for now, but it is coming. This is Thanksgiving Day, and you can see how things are very quickly marching south and east as temperatures drop to 10 to 20 degrees below the average for this time of the year, but they keep dropping. And here's next weekend, pretty cold across the eastern United States and the south, but brutal across western Canada here. This is as much as 40 degrees below average. This is the kind of cold that we saw back in December of 2022. But the difference this time Instead of a polar vortex dropping down into West Virginia, we just have waves of cold, which is more common for this time of the year. So you can see the first wave is here at the beginning of December, then another push. Here comes the next push farther east. And overall, the first 10 days of December are going to be pretty darn cold across the central and eastern United States. Here's a look at some of our temperature potential. This is the west here this week. And you can see the real cold is locked up in Canada. And you can see it's pretty mild in the southwest. But as we head towards next weekend, here comes the next wave of cold by the 1st of December, 20 to 30 degrees below zero potentially here, and that heads into the Dakotas. But the west is going to warm up here next week. You can see some fairly mild, at least for these areas, temperatures here for the first week of December. Heading into the north central states, here's where the cold comes. Starting tomorrow, this is not brutal yet, but here it comes, a lot colder by the 29th and the 30th. Black Friday into the following weekend, we see sub-zero temperatures, and it gets worse next week. Take a look at some of this here. And I got to move quickly, but I think this is the worst morning. It's going to be Monday when people are heading back to work and school from the holiday, and we're talking about sub-zero temperatures near the Twin Cities, and 10 below in Bismarck, and 20 below just across the border here across Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And that cold continues to come down. Here's another one at the end of next week, and this can change a little bit, but take a look at some of these temperatures here. This is pretty cold. It's not 2022 cold, but it is well below the average. We could have a few record lows get challenged. Looking at the Great Lakes, we have the benefit of the lakes keeping us a little bit milder. Now, that doesn't help in the lake effect snow department, but it does help from a temperature perspective here. So it does get colder. Chicagoland, we're down into the single digits by early next week. Certainly in Indiana and Ohio, we're down there by the 2nd and 3rd. Wisconsin, very cold. But the worst of it isn't going to come, I don't think, until the following weekend. And you can start to see here, by the 7th, we have days that may struggle to get out of the single digits in places like Madison and Milwaukee and Chicago. In Michigan, it's not quite that cold, but we're dealing with lake effect snow and cloud cover as a result. So do you want cold and dry, or do you want to get pounded by snow? I think some people actually want to see the snow, and you'll be happy with that forecast. But this is going to be a cold start here. Let's look at the east and the south here real quick. And you can see the mild air today, a nice afternoon, but turning much cooler tomorrow. As we head to Wednesday, it's not bad. We warm back up in parts of Texas, pretty decent here in Florida. And then our front drops in on Thursday. And you can see on Thursday, North Carolina will be in the 70s in the east, 30s and 40s in the west and the mountains. We see 30s in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and we see our front marching south and east here on Thanksgiving Day. And it will be a warm Thanksgiving in Florida, near 80 degrees. By Friday, it's still pretty warm, so the cold doesn't really get all the way down to you yet in Florida. We'll have some chillier nights. But as we head towards the beginning of December, it does get colder in Florida as well, and we see temperatures on Monday struggling to get out of the 50s in Central Florida and 60s in South Florida. The Florida Keys will be the place to go. Taking a look ahead here, you can see the cold continues to come down in waves. We get resistance in Florida, but it'll still be cool by Florida standards. And then looking at next weekend here comes the cold. We're going to have lows probably in the teens and 20s all the way down to Interstate 20, 30s across Florida, freezing temperatures close to New Orleans and Lake Charles. And those of you in South Florida are not going to feel that cold just yet. It's back and forth, but more back than forth. Finally, across the Northeast, Atlantic Canada, you can see here it'll be cooler tomorrow. Thanksgiving Day temporarily warms up into the 40s with driving rain potentially on the I-95 corridor, 30s across New England, 40s across the Maritimes here. As we get to Friday, though, it is going to be turning colder eventually. That cold doesn't quite get in here, though, until Friday night, and then take a look at the weekend. Much chillier temperatures. And Sunday, we struggle to get past freezing in places like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, and certainly Allentown. Next week stays cold across the entire region. Many of us will not make it past the freezing mark throughout the entire week, except maybe right on the coast. And here comes the next wave of cold into New England next weekend. We may see some brutal cold coming in our ski areas here as well. So total snowfall here, this is the blend of all the models. You can see our first system, mainly Canadian-based, but the upper part of Michigan gets it as well. Of course, the Rockies get heavy snow. As we head to Thursday and Friday, we see that snow picking up near into the east of the Great Lakes and the interior of the Northeast. And then we start to see more places farther south looking at snow on the ground, maybe down into southern Missouri and Kentucky next week, the mountains of North Carolina, and possibly even coastal sections of the Northeast, depending on what can spin up there. Here's a closer look here at the European shorter term. You can see 6 to 8 inches of snow, and then a little bit of lake effect here on Wednesday. Here comes our southern feature. Right now, totals do not look super impressive. A few inches possible at night, Wednesday night, in places like central Indiana and west central Ohio, but Michigan is going to largely miss out on this snow event here. You'll see heavier amounts as we get upstate into New York, northern Pennsylvania, and New England. Locally, 3 to 6 inches. A few places could see locally 8 or 9 inches, and then higher amounts as we get to Thursday night and Friday across upstate New York and western parts of Maryland. There'll be some lake effect, as you can see here on Black Friday, a few inches here, and maybe somebody gets a lot of snow off of Superior, off of Michigan, off of Huron, and certainly off of Lake Erie. And then after this storm moves out, Ontario gets it. And take a look at some of these totals. Erie, Hudson, Ohio, Ashtabula, places just north of Syracuse like Oswego and on up to Mexico and Parrish. We are probably going to see not just inches of snow, but probably feet of snow beginning on Friday and continuing into next weekend here. And we'll be tracking that in Buffalo. Could get very dangerous there as well. We don't see a blizzard like in 2022, but we will see the threat for some heavy snow. Here's a look at the GFS in the Northeast from our system coming in, and you can see it's not very impressed here. Just a few inches of mainly elevational snow, but here comes the lake effect behind it. Some pretty big totals here on the GFS. And here's the Canadian real quick, and you can see a little more than the GFS, less than the European, but generally speaking, just a 1 to 3 inch snowfall with higher amounts across the mountains. But take a look at what's coming. Maybe some major lake effect here on the order of 18 inches near and just to the south of Buffalo here in Erie County of New York. As we get to Saturday morning, this could be really bad across these areas as that cold air wraps in. So more of that to come. But as always, I thank you all for your time today. Hope everybody had a great weekend. I'm still catching up, so I'll be back tomorrow with probably more. And we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter as well due to the fact that time is limited. But as always, if you did enjoy this video, I thank you. And I ask you to come back, like and subscribe and share with your friends as well. And I want to give my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ all the honor and glory and all the thanksgiving for this opportunity to be able to share with everybody else. Paul tells the church of Philippi, Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. That's where I think a lot of us struggle. Whether or not you're a believer, I think a lot of people believe in a higher power. But being thankful for what you have and telling God that, in my opinion, is what strengthens that relationship. People want to be appreciated. God already knows that, but he wants the appreciation and the honor and the glory, and that's why I give it to him. It's been an anxious year. I know I've told a few this in the past, but my stepfather, we didn't know if he was going to make it this Thanksgiving, stage 4 liver cancer. And he's been through a few rounds of chemo, which have been just extremely difficult on his body and on my mom as well, who's taking care of him. But I saw him this past weekend. He got his MRI back, and we've been praying. We've had our friends praying, our churches praying. We've been just faithful to this. We don't blame God for cancer. We know there's cancer out there and there's nothing we can do to stop it. And that stinks. But his scan was clear. They couldn't find anything. And no, we're not out of the woods, but we thank God that we get another day and another day and another day. When you go to visit with your families coming up here, and I pray that you do, you at least get some time with your family, just be thankful. There's going to be disagreements on politics. Look, I don't vote for either side. I'm independent. I know I'm going to have family members on both sides talking about that. But you know what? I'm going to let it go. I'm going to give all the glory to God and say, I know who's in charge, God. It's you. It's not the Democrats. It's not the Republicans. It's you, Lord. And without you, I wouldn't be here, and I would not have the hope of what's coming eternally. And my stepdad would not be able to be a witness to what the power of God can do, what the power of prayer and healing can do. And I just want you all to just think about that. Just think about what has been good in your life and what can be better eternally for you. So just wanted to get that off my mind. I'm emotional about it, but we talk to our family members at a distance all the time. We all don't live close to each other. But when we see each other in person, we have the opportunity to do what many can't. And that is a blessing. So I pray that you're blessed and that you're not stressed this holiday season. And I'm going to be back on tomorrow, whether or not you like it. I'll catch up with you then. God bless you.